Well, good morning. There are several of you that haven't had a chance to see yet this weekend, and I'm so delighted that you're here. Thankful for your presence. We've been talking about the theme of why do we need God? And we've talked about several different things that are in proportion to our relationship with God. The first, on Friday, we talked about the fact that we need God because He is the most glorious, beautiful thing that exists, and we are meant for beautiful, glorious things. It's a part of our nature. We crave those things. We hunger for those things, and God is the pinnacle of that. And then we talked about the needs for us to reach out, to discover, to grope after, to verify. We talked about for God, that Paul said in Acts 17 that He's not far from any of us. He's there to be found, and that is something that is a part of our nature, that we are meant to be with Him. And then this morning in our class period, we talked about the brokenness of the mental health and the issues that can come with that because of sin. We looked at Psalm 142, and we saw how David was a man that was dealing with that mental anxiety and depression, not just because he was worried, but genuine issues. I think there were some clinical things going on for him, and how even the Savior himself dealt with that in the garden, and just the nature that vexed him with that. And I want to add something somebody mentioned about after my lesson this morning, about mentioning that for those who struggle with mental health and the frustrations that come with that, please understand that there's nothing wrong or faithless about seeking medical help. That is a stigma that has hung over Christians for a long time. It is not biblical. If it's biblical to seek out help for cancer or for diabetes or for any number of things, it's biblical to seek out help for the chemical things that go wrong in your brain, just as it would be if it was your heart or your lungs or your liver. I have been taking medication for 15 years, and it was one of the great things that allowed me to start to heal and seeking out counseling. And so someone mentioned how important that was, and so I wanted to reiterate that and just make a point of that if you didn't notice this morning, I'm making it clear now. Use those resources that God has given you. It has nothing to do with your faith. It has everything to do with the fact that we live in a broken world where things go wrong all the time. Things go wrong with our bodies. Things go wrong with our hearts. Things go wrong with our minds, our brains, and that's what mental illness is. But for our last topic for this morning, I was thinking how I want to wrap up this idea. I wanted it to be something that was very positive, and I wanted to direct us towards the idea of I need God, we need God because of His willingness and love and desire to lead us, to guide us, to bring us home to Him. And I got to thinking, how would I emphasize that? And I felt like going with the idea of Jesus being the shepherd, as He relates it there in John chapter 10. And if you'll turn over there, we'll be looking at that in just a few moments. But I wanted us to start with Psalm 23 this morning. I appreciate the reading. A psalm that even the world knows. And there's a reason for that, because it is so powerful in illustrating God's providential care for His people. You can't have a pulse and read that and not be moved by what David is saying about how he feels about God. But I want us to understand a couple things too about the nature of the shepherd and the sheep. The Bible is replete with different relationships that God uses to describe how He and man interact. And today we're going to be talking about the shepherd aspect, that metaphor, that idea of how He is the shepherd to us. And so if you will, now I'll turn over to John chapter 10. We're going to start with verse 7. John 10 and verse 7 beginning. John chapter 10, verse 7. Then Jesus said to them again, "Most assuredly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture." At first, it may have appeared to his audience that Jesus was simply talking about sheep, but by mixing his metaphors, it becomes clear who he's really talking about. He's not talking about sheep, he's talking about people, talking about men. Much like he said, you will go from being fishers of fish to fishers of men. He says, I am the shepherd to the sheep, not the critters, but people. But as we stop and think about that, it's important, and I want to spend a few minutes dealing with this now, to understand the nature of the critter that is a sheep. My wife grew up on a small farm in Indiana, and she had a couple of pet sheep. They didn't raise a whole bunch, but they had a couple of pet sheep. And between her and then talking with farmers, we want to understand the sheep metaphor because of what Jesus is teaching us, and what he is comparing us to is not really a compliment. Sheep are not the brightest critters on four legs. And so I am taking from a list that my father actually, when he put together a lesson, he got some descriptions from farmers and how they saw their sheep as they shepherded them. So here are some descriptions about these animals that I want to put in our minds because we're not always familiar with them. First of all, sheep are stupid and stubborn. Ever heard of a trained sheep? No, probably not. They are not very bright, and they're stubborn. They've got a strong will. They are dirty and wayward. They do not self-groom. My rabbit, one of the things I love about him is that he's got the big floppy ears and he grooms himself. He takes care of his own waste. He does a good job and he grooms himself so we don't have to give him a bath. It's very nice. Sheep do not groom themselves. In fact, they are known to, if you don't shear them well, to have their excrement stuck in their wool, and it becomes repulsive and nasty and not at all something that you want to just pick up and play with. They're stinky, they smell, they're prone to wander. They are defenseless and dependent. They don't have any camouflage, they don't have any scary roar, they don't have a vicious bite or a tail that strikes poison or venom like a scorpion. And really alone, they're losers. By themselves, they really just aren't a whole lot to think about. They get frightened easily, confused easily, and they are needy and high maintenance. That is the world of a shepherd. Those are just the realities of sheep. Now, it's not that Jesus was saying that because he wants us to be insulted, but rather so his audience would understand these things and it wouldn't have been a problem. But we need to step into that world and recognize that's how those animals behave. That's just the way God made them. And so there are things that shepherds need to do to deal with those things. Well, as we bring this to applying to ourselves and recognizes that God is highlighting our need and what in fact he himself is up against when it comes to dealing with us. Furthermore, he's teaching us what to expect when we look at each other. This might be a newsflash to some. Sometimes brethren can be irritating. Sometimes we can get on each other's nerves. Sometimes we can struggle with things. Think about as human beings what we know. Can we ever be stubborn? How about Peter? Was Peter a stubborn man? He was the impetuous guy. He jumped into things and multiple times told Jesus, nuh-uh. He told Jesus, no, that's not how things are going to happen. Well, let's face it, Peter's not alone in that. We have done the same thing to God in our lives. People are dirty. I want to look over with you in James chapter 2 to kind of summarize this a little bit. James chapter 2. James 2, verses 1 through 6. James 2 verse 1 beginning says, "My brethren, do not hold the faith of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, with partiality. For if there should come into your assembly a man with gold rings and fine apparel, and there should also come in a poor man in filthy clothes, you pay attention to the one wearing the fine clothes and say to him, 'Oh, you sit here in a good spot.' And the other to the poor man, you say, 'You stand here, or you sit there at my footstool.' Have you not shown partiality among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my beloved brethren, has God not chosen the poor of this world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom, which he promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor man, and do not the rich oppress you and drag you into the courts." According to James, who is really the sheep here? In this context, as he's describing it and telling these people why they shouldn't disregard the dirty guy, the poor guy, well, it's because he ends up being the real sheep as James describes him. He says, has not God chosen the poor and the sick and the lame? Is that not who the gospel appeals to, is ultimately what he's saying. Poor, broken, dirty people are what the kingdom is made up of. That's who want to find themselves under the care of Jesus. It's the humble, and that is definitely the sheep. How about the wayward? When you think about the prodigal son, what was one of the points? If not, people wander away from where they should be, from who they should be. They become dissatisfied and they wander. But at the end, he knew he was unworthy. Again, that's the sheep. How about that we are defenseless? When you look at Luke chapter 18 and the publican and the sinner and the prayer that Jesus gives, he says, "God, be merciful to me." He knew his lot. He understood that without God, his sin had him lost forever. So he appeals to God for that. Jesus talks about, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." Sheep understand that they are defenseless, that they need God's help. And also, high maintenance. Can brethren ever be high maintenance? Can you ever be high maintenance? Look at a couple passages with me in Matthew chapter 18. Matthew chapter 18. Starting with verse 21. "And Peter came to him and said, 'Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Jesus said to him, 'I do not say to you up to 7 times, but to 70 times 7. And if we'll couple this with Mark chapter 3, verses 4 and 5, Mark chapter 3, verses 4 and 5. Then he said, "Do ill." And when he had looked around at them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched out his hand, and it was restored as whole as the other. Man's sin needs a lot of attention from God. Don't ever fool yourself into thinking that you are not a needy creature, because we are. Our culture prides itself on the idea of the don't need anybody, American dream catcher, and it's such garbage because it's totally false. But that mindset can permeate us, even as God's sheep who have gone astray and have come back, but we can still forget that that is what we have been. And that as opposed to informing us about our relationship with others, i.e., be merciful so that you may obtain mercy, we can become a little high-minded possibly and can even feel like, oh, what's wrong with those people over there? I found myself fall prey to that before. People that weren't Christians and were doing foolish things, and I found myself just feeling superior to them. Now, my situation is superior because I've been saved, but I am not superior. I am not more worthy or better than them. God loves them just as much. But it can lead me to forget that I am the sheep, the wayward, smelly, dirty, knuckle-headed guy who got himself into trouble and desperately needed a Savior. This is the reality of who we are. And no one wants to bask in the glow of their sheephood. I don't know what else to call it. But it's the reality. And the sooner we humble ourselves and embrace it, the sooner I humble myself and say, I need God, the sooner I can get to busy doing the things that I'm here for and enjoying the relationship with him and with his people. Over in Isaiah chapter 53, a passage that we so often use to describe what the Messiah did for us on the cross, but in it is the description of the people that he came to save. In Isaiah 53, verse 6, you know this even without turning to it. All we like sheep have gone astray. All we, he says, we have turned every one to his own way, and Yahweh has laid upon him the iniquity of us all. All of us have done this, haven't we? If you are old enough to understand what I'm saying, and you're at that age where you can comprehend sin, you have committed it. You've gone astray. I have gone astray. There aren't certain sheep that are just allowed into the pen because, well, they're already perfect. We just want them to come in. Every sheep in this sheepfold has come through the door of Jesus because they needed him. And they continue to need him. There is this, I don't know what you'd call it. It's not really a story. I guess it's kind of a poem, a parable, something along those lines. It's called the 23rd Lament. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to have the 23rd Psalm read, because this is kind of like the negative side of someone, that they're writing a 23rd Psalm, but it's a lament. This is what I do. It's the antithesis of what the shepherd does, because this is what I do to myself, is what the writer is coming from. The 23rd Lament: I am my own shepherd. I'm always in need. I stumble from maul to maul, job to job, shrink to shrink, seeking relief, but never finding it. I creep through the valley of the shadow of death and fall apart. I fear everything from pesticides to power lines, and I'm starting to act like my mother. I go down the weekly staff meeting, and I'm surrounded by my enemies. I go home, and even the goldfish scowls at me. I anoint my head with Tylenol, my Jack Daniels runneth over. Surely misery and misfortune will follow me all the days of my life, and I will live with self-doubt forever. There's a little bit of humor mixed in there, but I think the point is a very candid one. We know people like this, don't we? We know people like this, whose lives are just like what was described. The thing is, were it not for God, that would be you and me, in some varying form. Maybe Jack Daniels and Tylenol aren't what you get addicted to, but you understand what the point is. Lost and wayward, hopeless and helpless. A sheep without a shepherd, gone astray. But as we think about this in our relationship to Jesus, being that the door of the sheep, that he is the one that can provide us, that he's the one that allows us to come in, that this is what he's offering because we are sheep, because sheep need a shepherd by design. What in fact does he offer? Why do we need this shepherd? Well, because he promises the abundant life. Over in John 10, verse 10, turn back to that passage with me, please. John 10:10. John 10, verse 10, he says, the thief does not come except to steal, to kill, and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. Jesus illustrates the point that sheep are in danger. And I think that's a problem a lot of folks don't understand, that they're in danger, that there's a predator out there trying to get them. We walk around with so much self-confidence and so much of the, I can do it. Oops, sorry about that. I can do this on my own, that they don't realize they're being stalked. And they don't realize that they're slowly being eaten by this predator, and they're oblivious to it because they're strong, they're independent. No one is strong and no one is independent apart from God. Nobody. And the old adage, take heed the fellow that stands, because he's going to fall. But Jesus says, I've got something to give to you that will be the relief and the protection that you need. Thieves and predators are always on the lookout for an easy steal or an easy meal. And this guidance and protection make him our shepherd. Because he sees to the needs that we have. He sees to the defense that we have. He understands where we need to go, where we need to stay away from. And he's coming to give us this life. And he says abundantly. Lest we forget that although eternity is our ultimate goal and is where the best is yet to come, Paul told Timothy that godliness is profitable for this life and the life to come. So this life also has an abundance to be offered. It's not the focus, but there's good, abundant life even to be had here before eternity. There's good stuff in being with Jesus. There's protection and there's goodness. That's why the 23rd Psalm is so powerful, because David is describing his relationship with God, and there's a lot of good things going on right then and there for him. Oh, he had his troubles. We looked at Psalm 142. But there are good things, abundant life type things to be found now in serving Christ. Not only has the shepherd come to protect and give his life, but he has also come with that abundant offer. Let me ask you something. Is abundance how you would describe Christianity? I mean, just think to yourself and just do an honest appraisal. Is Christianity about abundance, or is it about rules and regulations and things you can't do that you want to do? Now, we're all tempted. Please don't mistake me for saying that you should never be tempted. Oh, you're going to be tempted. The devil's good at that. Jesus was tempted. Not wrong to be tempted. But do we describe to people Christianity as an abundant life, or would it be more like the thou shalt not life? And depending on how we answer that, we might want to reconsider whether or not we're really paying attention to what Jesus is saying. Because the Lord himself, who lived among us and is our creator, says, I am offering an abundance, a life that will have that both here and in the life to come. Now, of course, we always want to be careful how we define that. Abundance, by God's definition, is not abundance as the world defines it. Again, how does the world define abundance? The 23rd lament. How many people do you work with or go to school with who are working for the weekend so they can get drunk and wake up holding some porcelain throne in a sleazy bathroom? It's disgusting. But that's what they live for. That's the abundant life. I remember a member of my wife's family once criticized my wife and I because we lived this holy life, and he says, you're missing out on all the fun. You're missing out on what the real world offers. And our response was, you can keep the real world, because we don't want it, because the 23rd lament is the real world. But when we offer the gospel to others, when we are trying to sell Jesus Christ to people, are we selling them the abundant life, or are we selling them the thou shalt not life? Because Jesus is telling us there's good stuff to be had, but we got to believe that. Let me give you for instance, for about 2 weeks, tried to sell Cutco cutlery. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, but it's this really fancy stuff. That these knives, I never thought I'd be selling knives, but anyways, they were really cool. I mean, they were awesome. They were good quality. They lasted a great reputation. But let me tell you something. There was this homemaker set. It had the whole kit and caboodle in it, all the knives and the carving knives and all this stuff. And it had a whole bunch of things in it, and it was $800. That was back 20 years ago. I can't imagine what it'd be now. And I was trying to sell that to people. And even though I knew those knives were good, I did not believe for 1 second that was worth $800. And you know what? It showed. Because I didn't sell a single one, and people could almost hear me apologetically. So, would you be interested in buying one? And that's how I felt. I probably even looked that way once or twice. No one was going to buy that because I didn't buy it. I didn't believe in it. I wasn't convinced that it was an abundant homemaker set worth the $800. And so I didn't sell a single one. And shortly thereafter, I got out because I realized that selling knives was not in my future. If we don't believe or are not convinced that Christianity is the abundant life, we're going to have a hard time selling Jesus Christ. We got to believe it. We got to be convinced of it, or it's going to be hard. But Jesus is telling us, he's welcoming us, hey, taste this. You need me, Rick, and let me tell you why you need me. You've got all these deficiencies, and I've got all the answers to those things. Every single one of them, I am offering that type of life. But you know, when you get right down to it, even if Jesus wasn't offering some super duper abundant life, the fact that he gave his life to save me in and of itself ought to be enough to keep this sheep close by his shepherd, to be moved by his sacrifice. The depth of his love, the weight of his sacrifice alone should prove to me that he's worth my help. It's interesting. I think a lot of times we watch videos on YouTube or whatever. It amazes me how many times there will be predator types of animals, a big cat, a wolf, that will get caught in a snare, and a hunter will come along and free them, and that animal hangs around. Sometimes they even follow them back to their house. Now, my first thought is, well, he's just looking for an easy meal. But then they end up befriending them, especially like wolves and things like that. Something that is skittish, but there's something about that act of mercy, that saving them, that they somehow they recognize. And I don't pretend to understand how smart animals can be, but I'm pretty convinced that they know when someone has done something for them. They're scared, they're terrified, they don't know what to do, and now they're free, and this person, they suddenly feel attached to them. Well, sheep are dumb. They don't have that sense to know, oh, that big thing with giant claws, let me walk up to that and stick my head in it and see how that goes. Sheep aren't all that bright. And these creatures, that if that's me, then I would certainly be attracted to someone who has saved me, who has not only saved me, but gave his life for me. That in and of itself should be enough to attract me to Jesus. John chapter 10, verse 11. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. This might seem like a strange concept to us today, but a shepherd would die to protect his flock. The first century Palestinian would mainly raise sheep actually for wool and for dairy. They did not eat them. I mean, they did, but that wasn't the main thing. These animals would live in their homes as this pet that provided the wool, provided milk for years and years and years. The closest thing I can think of is how we treat our dogs, maybe even our cats, but dogs definitely have that loving companionship that is so powerful. They call him man's best friend for a reason. That's how they viewed their sheep. And I have talked to enough dog owners. I've been one myself a couple times, but I've talked to enough dog owners to know that when that dog dies or did die, the pain and the sorrow, it was not just okay, they wandered off. Like my buddy who raises chickens, he says, every now and then we come back and find a bunch of hen feathers all over the floor and realizing something got it. Oh, well, we'll raise up a new chick and then we'll have a new hen. And he doesn't get broken up about it. They're not attached to the birds like that. But if his dog, if something came and ate his dog, that'd be a totally different story. And I think a lot of us can understand that. That's how they felt about their sheep. They would give their lives to protect the sheep. They were that important to them. And that is the imagery that Jesus is pulling on. There was a strong bond built by years, maybe even a decade or more of time. Look at verse 14 of this same opening when Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep and am known by them. There is a tremendous amount of intimacy between sheep and shepherd in the physical world. How much more so in the spiritual world? The fact is, God knows what he's getting into with us. He knows that we are weak and defenseless and easily scared, wayward. And he signed up for it anyways. And he continues to press on to help us, which ought to be a message when we're starting to feel the devil telling us, you're just not worth it. You're just more trouble than it's worth to God. Remember, God knew what he was doing when he signed up. Jesus knew what he was doing when he signed up to be the shepherd of our souls. It's not lost on him. He knows we have needs, and he wants to fill them. It reminds me of when I first realized that I wanted to marry my wife, Nicole. It was when I realized that I desperately want to help this woman get to heaven. I even prayed one night driving back from having been at her house, her parents' house, and visited with her, that I said, Lord, equip me to help get this woman to heaven. And that's when I realized that I wanted to marry her, because I wanted to spend the rest of my life helping to serve her and helping her to know who God is and to have that relationship with him. That's what my heart wanted to do. And I'd never really thought about falling in love that way before. Of course, I'd never had a girlfriend before either, which didn't help. but it was suddenly dawned on me that this is what love is supposed to be about. The very best thing I want for her is to know God and to help her. And I was convicted, and that's what I wanted to make my life about, helping her please God. God wants the very best for us. He created us to have a need for him, and he wants to fill that need. He is not standing afar off at a distance, just kind of looking at us and casually watching. He is deeply invested in you, in your life, in the things that you struggle with, in your heartbreaks, your sorrows, in your successes. Nobody cheers for you like Jesus. Nobody. Nobody smiles at the good things that you do day to day that might go unnoticed by the rest of the world. But Jesus smiles when he sees those good things, because he's your shepherd and he loves you and he is more invested in you than you can possibly fathom. That's what our Bibles teach us. If you'll turn over to 1 Peter chapter 1, I got one more passage for us to look at here. 1 Peter 1. We'll start with verse 17. And if you call on the Father, who without partiality judges according to each one's work, conduct yourselves throughout the time of your stay here in fear, knowing that you were not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold, but from your aimless conduct, received by the tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, as a lamb without blemish and without spot. Our shepherd became a sheep to save us. That's pretty epic. A couple times I had my dogs, I loved them, but I would never become a dog. I see what they put in their mouths. I can't imagine our Creator, the perfect, sinless God who is never tempted by evil, has never experienced physical pain or suffering or thirst or want, suddenly takes a nosedive into neediness by becoming a human being so that he could serve my neediness better. That's what the book of Hebrews spends a whole bunch of time talking about, that Jesus became one of us. It was the Father's will that he empirically experience what it means to be human. He did that for us. The shepherd became a sheep so that he could lead at the front, so that we don't just look at him and say, well, he doesn't know what it's like to be us. No, he's the lamb that was slain and has risen again. That shepherd is also the sheep that gave his life for the flock. And we don't want to forget that. We don't want to forget what it cost Jesus to save us and then to continue to put up with us. Because it is a remarkable thing. When we consider the great predator that is out searching for us, we have to understand that the remedy is a drastic one, that he is crafty, he is powerful, and he has wounded all of us through sin. One of the things that shepherds do is bind up and heal the wounded. And that is what Jesus offers to you today. Why do you need God? Why do I need God? Because I am lost and defenseless and wayward and helpless and wounded, and I will die if I do not have his help. I became a Christian because I recognize I have those needs. I still struggle to stay humble about those needs. Maybe I'm not the only one, but I'm trying. But if you are a sinner, then you too are the defenseless, wounded, stubborn, wayward, dying sheep. And there's only one shepherd who will tend to you and actually heal you, and then spend the rest of your life defending you and protecting you till the wolf has been crushed, till the serpent's been defanged, till the enemy is no more. Only Jesus Christ will stick by you. Only Jesus Christ will feed you and nourish you and make you even better than what you were before. Only Jesus Christ can satisfy the need that you have for God. And yes, you need God. If you are here this morning and have not obeyed the gospel, I encourage you to do that. Why? What are you waiting for? Do you believe that Jesus of Nazareth really is the Son of God who conquered death? Do you believe that he is the Lord that the Bible claims him to be? Are you ready to confess that before people, to say, yes, I believe he is the Son of God, and I am ready to commit my life to him for that? In committing your life, you are repenting of the sins you've committed. You're saying, this was my old life. I cast away the waywardness and the greed and the lust and the evil things. I don't want to be those things anymore. And Jesus will wash away your sins in the watery grave of baptism, where you meet his death and you rise up to be a new creature, a pure, spotless lamb, or in other metaphors, the beautiful virgin bride of Christ, to forever have his love and protection, his friendship, all the things that we needy sheep need. You will find it in Jesus Christ. If as a person who has committed themselves to Christ, have you been wayward again? Have you been wishy-washy in your commitment? Maybe there's sin that just hasn't been dealt with, that you're ready to deal with that now. Whatever those needs are going to be, this group stands ready to serve you, to help you. Most importantly, Jesus Christ stands ready to save and forgive and to bind up those wounds. But you got to deal with them now. You got to confront them now, because he's not going to force his love upon you. My friends, you need God. But the best part is God craves you. And he has given his only son to prove it. What do you need from us this morning? Come forward and let us know what that might be as we stand and sing.